I want to talk to you about heroes. Do you know what a hero looks like? Well, this is the traditional picture of a hero. Al Gibson in Braveheart. How could you be any more heroic than that? But I tell you what, the heroes that I know don't look a little bit like that. Do you see this book? It was the most expensive book I bought year after year. This is the Street Directory of Melbourne, and to get the most recent edition, which you needed to add in all the new estates, would cost $42 in your local newsagent. And this is what they looked like. And the infuriating thing about them is every time you were looking for a street, it was always in the fold of the page or just on the edge. And you had to try and piece together what the street looked like on the other page. Drive you crazy. GPS has put an end to all of that. Why am I telling you this? Because it was through street directions that I recognized one of the most heroic people I have ever known. This lady, June, came to our recovery workshop, our grief recovery workshop. She snuck in a little bit late. She looked very shy. She didn't speak at all on the first night or on the second night, but on the third night, she told us her story. After apologizing for herself, she said she'd never finished high school and her only job was as a shop assistant. She started to tell us her story. She lived 1 hour beyond Canberra in the countryside of New South Wales, and she was in an abusive marriage. Her husband didn't hit her, but every day, every night, he insulted her. He said she was boring, she was brainless, she had no personality, and she believed what her husband said. And she said, I would have taken my own life except for my 3 children. She finally recognized that for the sake of her own life, her own sanity, and for her children, she had to leave her husband. But how could she do this? She could barely drive the car, only to the school and the supermarket. That was her only experience. Her plan was to go to Sydney, where her auntie lived and who she'd been able to confide in and who knew her terrible situation. But that was 400 kilometres, and to get there she had to go through the city of Canberra. Now, the city of Canberra is designed on circles. The streets are all on circles, and if you've been to Canberra and you've tried to drive through it, you know you can very easily get lost. Well, she said, what I did was, because I daren't take my eyes off the road, this is the longest drive I've ever undertaken, I wrote on my hand, you see, I wrote on my hand the directions of how to get through Canberra, the streets, the corners, the turns, and so on, so that when I was driving, I could look at my hand like that and see how to get through Canberra. But then she had a much worse problem, because she had to get to a Sydney suburb, and she would be entering Sydney, the largest city in Australia, at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and the traffic would be horrific. But she achieved it. This is how. She said, what I did was I wrote the directions of every turn, of every traffic light on my hands. And as I got nearer to the city, my hands were covered with these maps I'd drawn with a black pen. And then I had to do these maps all over my arms. So I would stop in a safe place and do the next map and the next corner, and then when I'm driving I can look at it like that. And she said by the time I got to my auntie's, my both arms were covered with maps right up to my shoulder. But she said, that's how I got to my auntie's. After she had spoken, the group was silent, and I know I had a lump in my throat. And then she started apologizing again for herself. I know I'm dumb and I haven't got much initiative, but that's how I did it. And then we started. We don't think you're dumb at all. We think you're brave. We think what you did was wonderful. You're a hero. Now I'll just tell you the rest. So the following night of the course, she came along and she was wondering how she would be received. She was received with welcome. And then she started on this business. I know I don't have an education. I know I've got a very flat personality. And the group gathered around her and they said, we don't believe that at all. And in the period of the group life, that was another 4 weeks, she was affirmed by the group and she started to smile and she stopped apologizing for herself. Let me flip ahead for a year. She entered herself into a university course. She trained to be a professional person. And she was the life of our parties because we had many parties with the Grief Recovery Workshop. And she was always the brightest thing. And she went like a magnet to people who were in trouble. And she was kind and welcoming and encouraging to them. But she blossomed into a beautiful personality. We never wanted to have a party without her. Now, that little woman and what she did for her children makes her, in my estimation, a wonderful hero. And I just want to say that there's a hero living in you. You don't have to believe what people say about you. You don't have to measure yourself by the measures of education or success. You are a great person. And you can do wonderful things if you let your heart guide you. And some of the things may not seem tremendous to other people, but believe me, they're Braveheart material. Own your own self. Love yourself. Give yourself to others. God bless.